Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for this session for the BWC PIP National Meeting. I'm Rachel Johnston. I'm the BWC TTA Program Manager. Our next session is about using body-worn cameras to enhance field investigations with Tom Kristoff and Tom Woodmansee, who are joined by representatives from Rochester, New York, and Wichita, Kansas. I'm now going to turn it over to our presenters, Tom and Tom.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate it. I'll kick it off, and I appreciate everybody's time this afternoon. As Rachel mentioned, I'm Tom Woodmansee, and I'm really pleased to be facilitating this discussion. We have an outstanding panel for today's topic, a lot of great experiences with body-worn camera in the field. So for me, I am a senior advisor with CNA, and I've worked with the body-worn camera program for several years, both as a SME and as an advisor. I'm also a retired police officer from Madison, Wisconsin, where I did 25 years in various roles and responsibilities. I was a detective for over 13 years, and then lieutenant of training and lieutenant of detectives. So before I turn it over to the panel for their introductions, I just want to touch on what our goal is. Our goal for this session is to really have an open discussion with our panel, and which includes officers and a researcher who do work in the field on body-worn camera and how it can be better utilized to assist police outside of the traditional ways that we are most aware of and comfortable with. And I believe, as you've heard with others with the meeting, that one of the most impactful outcomes of BGA's body-worn camera program is our ability to network, the opportunity to learn from each other. And we hope this discussion provides you with some information that you can apply. And we also hope to get information back from you on ways that you may be utilizing body-worn camera in innovative ways that others can learn from. So I think we all recognize that the initial push for body-worn camera stems from community demand for more police transparency and accountability. But from my experiences and what I believe, I've really seen how body-worn camera can help our industry, even beyond what we already know, in important topics such as officer safety, chain of evidence, complaint processes, training, use of force, and community trust. So what can we do more to utilize body-worn camera to help us? And I think another area that we really want to touch on in this discussion is in the field, with patrol and investigators. So I'm excited for this, and I will turn over for individual introductions with our panel. And let me start off with Dr. Kristoff. Tom, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, sir. Yes, Tom Kristoff. I'm a senior research scientist at CNA. I also am on monitoring teams in Portland, Oregon, and Chicago, Illinois, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you, Tom. Wichita, Officer Baird, please introduce yourself.
I'm Officer Tim Baird with Wichita Police Department. I am the administrator for our body-worn camera program, and I assisted with the development and deployment of that program, beginning with the testing phases all the way back to 2011.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. And Lieutenant Prokowski, would you introduce your staff who's helping with this session, please?
Sure. I'm Lieutenant Mike Prokowski. We're from Rochester Police Department, Rochester, New York. About 5 years ago, we started our body camera program, and whether good or bad, it's followed me now into investigations, and it currently comes under a myriad of other units that I have here. Who I have here is Investigator Tom Cassidy to my left, and then further to the left is Investigator Andy McKenzie, both of them seasoned homicide investigators, and I asked them to join us here today.
Great, thanks, Lieutenant. And we've got some questions that I will ask the panel, but before we dive into that, I just want to provide some examples that we're hearing around the country on some innovative and perhaps not innovative, depending upon your experiences, applications where body-worn cameras are helping officers and detectives in the field. We have been told that the Atlanta Police Department Special Victims Unit uses body-worn camera for domestic violence investigations. And the follow-up, investigators will look at patrol officers' raw footage of how the house looks, the scene, and at the time of the victim's demeanor, and it aids them with their investigations and also follow-up specifically to getting search warrants. We've been also told by Tampa PD that they're utilizing their body-worn camera to aid them in solving cold case homicide investigations, which is quite significant. Even one officer that I spoke with directly said something as simple that I found interesting, that he activates his body-worn camera when he runs radar, and the video footage reinforces what the radar reads for him. So he found that to be very beneficial. We're also hearing, and I think this is something that agencies are training their officers in, is to have the officers articulate their environment, talk to the cameras when tactically appropriate, articulate what their surroundings are, what they're hearing, what they're seeing, what they're feeling in dangerous environments, where the body-worn camera can't necessarily capture that. So it goes to almost a video audio report of what the officer is sensing during dangerous environments. We've also heard, and I think this is a really important example of utilizing body-worn camera footage for critical incident after-action debriefs. Many of us have been in these, and we know the stress that comes along with the ability to recall. And the body-worn camera footage can really help officers in validating what their actions were, validating what their decision-making was, or as an opportunity for them to learn from when the decisions or their actions weren't necessarily the best for the situation. And then, of course, the tactical examples that we're seeing more and more of that's been touched upon in this meeting with civil unrest. Agencies are using and thinking outside the box, using their body-worn camera to further enhance the positions and locations, setting up specific tactical responses. And also by live streaming their body-worn cameras to set key locations for their officers. So, and more, and some of my experience has been in the training academy for my department, applications to use body-worn camera for scenario-based training in both pre-service and in-service is rising, and I think very appropriate. And one thing that we've heard from one agency is they really utilize it for their major crime scene documentation. The footage that their responding officers received when environmental factors like the weather or multiple responders contaminate change the and also for officer-involved shootings, where they're ballistic tracings to identify where the shots were fired, and they're able to recover shell casings and bullets. So these are just some examples that we're hearing, but I really want us to hear from the panel. So let's kick it off. And as we do, I'd like the audience to please consider during the discussion, if you, to respond to this question at the end for us, do you have any examples or experiences with how your agency has utilized body-worn camera innovatively to enhance your field investigations, both patrol, forensically, or detectives? So just please keep that in mind, and we'd love to hear from you. So let's start off with the Q&A, and let me start with Wichita. How are your body-worn cameras used outside of standard patrol, and what have they done to help you do your jobs better? Tim?
Yeah, so the Wichita Police Department started out by outfitting our patrol officers with the cameras. That grew to being covering also our service officers, or our non-commissioned service officers, who are responsible for assisting us with calls for service that may not require a commissioned officer. For example, picking up evidence. If we've worked a case and there's video evidence to be picked up later, that service officer can go pick that up for us. And they now have the cameras to show who they've retrieved this evidence from. And then they also assist us with DUIs and the investigation of DUIs. So they'll be on scene to run the intoxilizer. And they have come up with a mount, I guess, that they put in our vans, our intox vans, where they actually remove the camera from their head, and they'll use the magnet on the camera to dock that on the mount and have a constant view of the subject in the van while they're doing the 20-minute deprivation period and the intox itself. They also assist us with traffic accidents. So having the camera on at the traffic accident, whether the officer shows up before the vehicles move out of the road and vehicles move before photos are taken, now we have the video of the vehicles in place in the road. Our community support specialists, it's two individuals on our department who they're civilians, and they are kind of our liaison between the department and DCF, family services, they will have cases assigned to them where they may have questions about families or about interactions that officers have with families and services that they may be able to assist in offering. They now have access to our videos or the officers' videos where they can look at the inside of a house, the living conditions, and see what kind of conditions the kids are in to better help them with offering services. Oftentimes we will see poor living conditions that they will see when they make a phone call and say, do you have time tomorrow for me to stop by? By then the house is cleaned up, they're expecting the visit. But on an emergency or 911 call, they haven't done that. So they get the raw video and the look of what's happening in that house. In the patrol stance idea, we've also had officers make a little a stick and put a clip for a flashlight and a little metal clip where they can clip their camera, their head cam to, and they can put it up in an attic and be able to use it. Instead of popping their head up into an attic, they stick this camera up and they can use their mobile device, their iPod or iPhone, to view that live video, which is it's a huge help. Nobody wants to put their head up in an attic where you don't know what you're getting ready to look at. So those are a few ways that we've started to use it in the past few years, outside of just patrol officers. We've also ended up outfitting our patrol supervisors with the cameras as well. So they are, when they arrive on a scene, their camera is on, not only capturing the view of, if the supervisor's in the street monitoring the scene, they're getting an overall view of the scene, but they're also getting some discussions of how they're going to handle things if the officers didn't turn their cameras off for this private conversation, and that can be used to assist with the report writing.
Great, thanks, Tim. I appreciate that, and I'll direct my next question to Dr. Christoph, and I think it's important, especially given our current environment and climate, which has been talked about greatly throughout this meeting. But Tom, what are some of the ways that departments can use body-worn camera to improve relationships with the community?
Sure. I think that there's a couple of different ways that they can do that. There's the public facing ways that they can do that, and that might include, when they're going to release footage and setting that expectation, having that policy of we will release footage here. Being able to have that dialogue with community members when you're reviewing a body-worn camera video, being able to tell community members, these are the things that we look for. This is how we kind of determine whether this is an in policy or out of policy event, things like that, where it really helps the shared understanding between departments and between community members. And then another way is kind of doing some internal evaluations using those videos. So there's things that we've long known which will impact the police's relationship with the community. There's things like respectful interactions, doing tactical positioning, and other concepts related to procedural justice, positive communication skills, and de-escalation. I think that oftentimes it's the really critical incidents, the high publicity incidents, and things of that nature that get reviewed extensively, but those everyday seemingly innocuous interactions don't get looked at as much. And those are really critical to be able to take those small interactions, review those with the officer, look at their communication, look at their positioning, and look at other things that we know might impact the community's perception. And if you can really look at those small interactions and get the officer to see, okay, I could have done this differently, I could have done this differently, you can get that behavioral change. And I think one of the concerns is with those small innocuous interactions, those really can reinforce negative perceptions of police. And so bringing that up with officers and then using that as a moving forward tool, I think is a really good way to improve the relationship with the community.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. And let's move to Rochester. And Lieutenant, you've got your expert investigators there. So tell us, do you use body-worn camera footage in all of your investigations? And can you talk about if they've enhanced your investigations in any way, and how so?
So I'll just speak generally, and I'll let these guys give some examples specifically how we use it. But I can tell you, primarily up here, we do with all major crimes, all murders, all homicides. We deal with child sex abuse and physical abuse and missing persons. So generally and I'll speak to, the homicides, we make it as part of our case folder, all body-worn camera footage right from the beginning. I know that either the investigators or the sergeant will review it all, not necessarily to compare it to an individual report, but to see if any details of the investigation maybe weren't captured because the initial responding patrol officer is busy taking care of other stuff. But generally, it's all made part of our case file. I will tell you the one thing, and speaking of what Tom was saying, the one thing that we kind of run into a little bit of a quandary with is, once we make it part of our case file, does it become evidence or not? And, I know that the public wants all this information as soon as they can, but from our standpoint, it's evidence. We wouldn't, if we had surveillance video or something like that of an actual shooting or a murder that took place, that's not something that would be released. So we're constantly kind of getting into a battle with, city government who wants to release it, particularly on anything officer involved. But, we still also have to think about preserving the fact that it is evidence and will it dictate whether a witness cooperates with us later or not. So I'll just put that out there. That being said, for anything specific, I'll open it up to Investigator Cassidy or Mackenzie and let them kind of talk to some of their experiences.
For me, I use the body camera for two reasons. I'll go back and look at the crime scene, try to watch as much body camera as I can from it, looking for things that officers didn't necessarily pick up on when they first got there. A week later, when I'm looking at it, I might know about a certain car that we were looking for, a certain person. I'm looking at the crowd. I'm looking at, so we've been able to go back and catch a plate number off of a car that the officer had no idea it was important at the time, but at some point their camera picked it up. Besides looking at the actual scene and hearing what their initial statements to the police or utterances, the other thing I'll do is use it for research. Might go back, if I'm looking at a certain subject as maybe a suspect in a homicide, I'll go back and look at all his other interactions with the police. How did he act those times when he dealt with them? What was he wearing? Is he wearing any of the same clothes that we might be looking for? Is he got a car that we might be looking for? Who was he with when he was in these other instances? And if I was going to, it's going to be someone I'll interview, I want to see how he acted with the police in the prior interactions. Is he someone's cooperative? Are there certain triggers that set him off to make him less cooperative? Or their hooks they had that made him more cooperative? And I'll try to spot those on video so I can, use it better in an interview. Another thing we used it for is an example. I had a homicide where we had a specific vehicle we were looking at, and we thought we didn't know who the suspect was. We knew what the vehicle was. We had a plate. We somehow had a plate on the vehicle. Went back and found that car had been involved in a motor vehicle accident several months earlier. We went back and found that interaction with the police during the accident report. And at that time, we found that the person who dealt with the officer with the accident had the same tattoo as our shooter. So we were able to use that to help solidify an identification of him. So we use it. So I use it. I don't have to wear one myself, but I use it mainly just for any ways I can think of it at the time that might help in an investigation.
One of the cases in particular where I've used it going back to a scene is, well, we found out after an arrest, we found out the defense was going to be stating that they were going to propose the victim of the homicide was also a victim of a home invasion at the same time. And our suspect had fled out of the side door of a house. We had video from the outside of the house, from across the street. But what came to be important with the body camera is when the first officers arrived on scene, we were able to show that the side door this guy said he ran out of had a deadbolt that was in the locked position. So even months after the initial case and arrest and preparing for trial, we were able to go back and look at it and still utilize that footage to come up with essentially new evidence to refute the defendant's claim, which ended up being very helpful and ended up securing us conviction.
So do you as investigators communicate to patrol anything specific about how their body worn camera footage is important to your investigations, or is it pretty much case by case? And when you go back and do the investigations, you just do the digging? Is there any information that you share that we can pass along with the audience that's good for patrol to know from an investigator perspective?
So for us, we have a fairly large department, over 700 officers. So there's not necessarily a lot of interaction between us. I mean, if it was a smaller department, on a case by case basis, I might have be a specific scene, and a lot of the officers I don't even know, but I might have a conversation with them then where we're gonna, let's use your body camera. I want to get consent from this person. I don't think it's someone that's going to necessarily feel comfortable signing something in the situation we're at. But if we get a verbal consent and it's on the camera, I feel just as, secure in doing that search with that. So we might, use that, or we might ask them to, hey, while we're in there doing this, will you just make sure that the guy over in the corner, can you make sure your camera catches the clothes he's wearing, or the whatever we may be looking for.
I mean, generally, I thought somebody had said about talking, we went to these cameras 5 years ago, and I think they've served their purpose for transparency for the community, but some unintended positives for us are in some of these investigations. And initially the training is about narration and kind of using the camera to be your recording device. I mean, I don't think there's any police officer that walks on a scene without a pad and a pen, and I tried to explain to them that essentially, forget about the pad and the pen. We can get that down later, but now you have a recording device basically taking the notes for you. And we tried to stress the importance of narrating while you're doing stuff. Some guys have caught on, some guys haven't, whether that would have been, whether somebody that does that really well on a job or not. I mean, ultimately, I think in investigations, we're looking at the whole scene and generally for the investigators, they're finding out details that the patrol guys never know. So they wouldn't necessarily know to highlight something on body camera, whether it was important or not. So that's something that we generally discover after.
Good. Thank you, gentlemen. That was helpful. Let me switch back to Officer Baird. You provided some innovative ways that Wichita is using body worn camera. Maybe expand on what your department has actually learned since your initial deployment and use of body worn camera. So Tim, some overall lessons learned and advice that you would pass along to the audience.
A few things that we've noticed. Well, we deployed fully deployed in 2015. So we're coming up in October will be 6 years with these cameras. Make sure my math is right there. 6 years with the cameras. The biggest thing that I've noticed is the policy revision. We built our policy. We did an extensive amount of research, had binders of other policies that we used to guide us in trying to create a policy for the Wichita Police Department. And I shouldn't have been, was a little surprised and disappointed when after 10 months to a year, a lot of things in that policy didn't properly apply to our agency. So I'm currently working on our third revision of our policy, changing how we're doing things, and unfortunately, it's changing to reflect our practice. I say unfortunately because I wish I would have done better in the beginning, but there's just we're all kind of self-taught here, getting all this rolled out. So we found that officers didn't particularly care for, and I was an officer as well wearing one, didn't particularly care for a procedure in the policy, and there were better ways to do it. So we went and revised. So if you're writing a policy, try to tailor it to your needs, but don't be surprised when after some use you switch things up a little bit to tailor it better for your agency. We've also seen in court, specifically in misdemeanor traffic court here in town, where it is also unfortunate, but if a traffic infraction isn't captured on the head cam, we use the Axon Flex head-mounted camera, then it's questioned in court whether or not it really happened. Looking back, and now we're with Axon, they are not doing a third generation of their Flex camera for now, but they are doing a third generation of their body cameras. We were looking at their body cameras, and we tested 4 of them, and because we started out with the head cams, and now judges expect to see that camera view out of the windshield, which you don't get with a center body mounted camera in a vehicle. We're not going to go with the body camera because of the need to have that view out of the windshield. We were going to end up having to do the body camera and the in-car camera system to still capture that windshield view. So I think if we had started our program with the body camera, it wouldn't be so much of a question, because the judges aren't so used to seeing that view. But unfortunately, that's where we're at. So we're kind of stuck now with either keeping the head cam or purchasing the body cameras and the vehicle or the in-vehicle camera systems. Initially, and on another note, initially when we came out with the cameras, when people started noticing we had cameras on our heads, I believe it helped de-escalate situations, because citizens in tense situations realized that they were being recorded, and they chose to calm themselves down so that they weren't captured on camera acting erratically or fighting with us. That has since kind of changed to more irritation that we do have cameras and that we are recording citizens. It's kind of flipped. Initially, it was we want all officers to have the body-worn cameras and all officers to record everything, and now a lot of times citizens are upset because we're recording them during our encounters with them. So that's been a little frustrating to deal with, but we work with it, and they're definitely still, it's better to have the video than not have the video.
So you raised an interesting point that we've had discussions on in the past, and some TTA deliverables with the body-worn camera program, is that you have seen specifically that body-worn cameras had an impact on the police's burden of proof, so to speak, that judges, juries are expecting footage, and that goes to charging decisions and prosecution. So I think that's not always obvious, but a good lesson for the audience to hear is it does have, and it can have, impacts on that, the expectation. And I anticipate the expectations only going to continue to grow. Is that fair, Tim?
I think that is accurate. Yeah, the expectation of having some type of video footage is definitely going to continue to grow. But it's not always negative. I mean, having the video, like the previous speakers there, the investigators spoke about, we recently won a suppression hearing for evidence for a federal case, because they were trying to suppress the evidence that we located in a house during a welfare check. Before entering the house, several officers were preparing to enter, and you could hear the supervisor saying, "Remember, we're going in to check the welfare, we're checking for bodies, and we're going to get back out." And that statement right there is what swayed the judge to let us keep all that evidence in. And that he wasn't doing it intentionally for the camera. He was being a good sergeant, and we were discussing before our entry This was a drive-by shooting. There were bullet holes in the front of the house. So by him saying that, saved this federal case, and this guy's doing some serious time now because of what was located in that house. So there are definite benefits in court to having them, but it is unfortunate that it's now becoming more and more expected to have.
Great, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Tom, Christoph, last year there were, as we all know, lots of protests across the country. From your experience and observations, how can body-worn camera be used to evaluate police response to the protests? Specifically, the ability to piece together multiple videos, gather a totality of the circumstances, and in general, training applications, shared experiences, et cetera, like that. Tom, can you touch on that for us?
Yes, sir. So I think that you've hit kind of some of the things that they can be used. So in general, you've got that accountability piece where when you're looking at the protest, you can look and gather the videos of different officers' actions during a particular event. And like you said, you can piece those multiple videos together. Whereas one video, it may not show everything that the officer sees. When you've got these protest events and these large crowds, you can piece those videos together, and that really helps you understand kind of everything that did happen there. But you can also use them after the fact. So I think, with crowd control events, they are more than any other type of interaction or event, they are uniquely rapidly unfolding events. They require a significant coordination across units, across officers. And so really the departments, when you've got these crowd control events, you can take those videos and you can really critique the approach, the tactics, and how the members' actions, how that conformed with policy. So for instance, with some of the reviews that we did, we had seen an inability to correctly articulate what active aggression is. And when we had some videos, we could look at the videos and say, does the subject's action, does that really lend itself to active aggression, or is this more physical resistance, and be able to have those conversations. Similarly, in one of our reviews, we had noted that a lot of the officers were talking about the actions of the crowd as opposed to the actions of the subject. So being able to take those videos and have a shared training experience of what conforms with policy and whether the department's approach was correct, and really be able to revise that approach or revise the policy or give supplemental training based on kind of that review of all the videos available.
Great, thank you, Tom. And I want to turn to Rochester, and I'm going to combine two questions because I believe it's Detective Investigator Cassidy. That's still you there, correct?
Yep.
All right. So there's a specific question to you, but let's do a general question, then one specific directly to you. Lieutenant, I'll ask you this. What would you tell investigators from a department that is just implementing body-worn camera to look for, to be aware of when doing investigations? So both of you, of course, can answer that, but let's start with that.
Well, it's probably a good question for me because I took this job 2 years ago and really wasn't in investigations before. I mean, a lot of our investigations hinge on video, not just body camera video. It's good and bad because we're finding, less witnesses willing to talk. It's a lot more violent out there. There's a lot more retaliation and threats being made to witnesses. So if we can make a case using surveillance video or body camera video, that bodes well for us. Certainly it's a picture as to what Wichita said. I mean, we're running into the same thing, unless we can go in there and present a case where there's some type of movie reel, a lot of people can't put themselves there, or, I don't want to say don't trust what we're saying, but we've moved into that age where most of our actions are all recorded, and that's where everybody is. So that's what they want to see. They want to see some type of video evidence, whether it be, an interview that we record or, a suspect vehicle leaving from a scene. They want to see video. That's powerful when we're going to go for a conviction. So for investigators, I guess I would just say that, you just have to review all this video time and time and time again. I mean, it's tough because, we run into, because of my role with the program, we're constantly getting foiled for this video, and people are trying to ask us, well, how come it takes 2 days to, properly redact what we need to redact on a 20-minute video? Well, that's because 20 minutes isn't just a straight shot. I mean, you watch it, you see stuff. If you get distracted in any way, all of our investigators work in an open environment. Somebody walks by, they say hi, now you're stopping and you're going back. So I guess from an investigator standpoint, I would say you just have to, very directly review all that video, because what from statements from other people could be corroborated with that video or refuted. And then you can learn a lot of minor details from that video as you watch it to substantiate your case.
Very good, sir. And specific to Investigator Cassidy, a question came in. I think it's the appropriate time to ask. I think based upon your comments earlier about an investigation you had, what is the process that you utilize for calling up all video related to a current suspect? Are you able to pull that up yourself, or do you need assistance from IT or an analyst? So how do you go about getting that, Tom?
So I have access to our system. I can pull all of that up myself. And I don't think everybody does, right?
No, in our department, investigators and above have access to all videos at a certain level of security, and which is the lowest level. And I have to tell you, 98% of our videos are at the lowest level. If we have an officer involved shooting or, something like that, we might up the security just so that we avoid any type of gawkers and stuff like that. Not necessarily because we're holding the information, but, we do want to preserve the rights of, officers going through a traumatizing incident.
So with that being said, so looking at the subject, I know his name, I can go through our records and find the incidents he's had, either a field contact or an arrest, or he was a victim or whatever, whenever he shows up in the reports. And then I can take those report numbers and then go look up the videos individually. Or I can look up by the officer. Maybe an officer said I dealt with him. I can go back and look at that officer's cameras, but it's usually just by researching his other contacts with our department and other departments also. Some of the surrounding towns have body worn cameras, and we'll use. We recently used in another homicide investigation. Actually, it was an officer involved shooting. The subject had dealt with a neighboring suburban police department earlier in that day, and we were able to get that body worn camera to show how his state of mind earlier, and how it actually said to the officer, "I'm going to die today," and then later lunged at one of our officers with a knife and was shot. So we don't. The whole thing is, for me, is thinking outside of the box. Use it. I don't know. I might think of a brand new way to use it tomorrow. Just trying to something that we were sort of forced upon us, but try to change it and use it to your advantage.
That's great, Tom. That actually sums up what this discussion is about. So I'm glad that you said that. That was part of my closing, is just thinking outside the box, and things will come in. And I'm hoping the audience too will think that way when we leave here. Is what other ways can we use it? I think the door's wide open for this. So you've given some great examples. I appreciate that. Wichita, Tim, related to cell phones, how has the department implemented cell phones with your body worn camera program?
So up until last year, officers were using Apple iPods to review the video footage from their body worn cameras. They're able to review it to get better statements from an interview. If somebody's talking too fast, they can't get the notes written down. They can get quotes from their video watching it. Starting last year, we deployed iPhones through T-Mobile Connecting Heroes program that they have for first responders. And with those, we're able to still run the cameras, larger screen to be able to review video, and also watch live video if we need to. Like I kind of explained before, using a stick to look up in an attic, but now with Axon, who we use, they have an app called Capture, And this capture app is able to take data and upload it to evidence.com, where the body worn camera footage also goes. The capture app can record, act as a voice recorder. It can act as a camera, video camera, or still photos and video. So in the field, officers can use that phone as their digital camera. And instead of having to plug it into a laptop to upload those photos into a file and then move the file into our storage, our records management system, they take the photos, title it with the case number, and click upload. And just like a social media app, it uploads all your photos or videos or audio recordings straight to evidence.com. Which in the field makes it a lot quicker. And now also in investigations, it makes it quicker. Up until last year, if an officer took photos and had a voice recording and had body worn camera footage, when the investigator received that case, they had to go to evidence.com to pull the body worn camera footage. They had to go to a folder called the DVI folder to pull their photos, and they had to go to another folder to pull their audio recordings, and then into another program to pull the paper case report. They still have to go pull the report for a different program, but now all of their other electronic data, body camera, still photos, voice recordings, when they type in a case number in evidence.com, it's all right there in front of them, and they can pull it into an electronic case file. So it has made the process a lot easier from patrol all the way up to investigators.
Great. Excellent. So we've got 7 minutes remaining, and appreciate the Q&A to this point. There are a few questions that have come in, so I'm going to open that up to everyone. And I think I'll start with this and direct this to Rochester, and then Wichita if you have any follow-up to it. The question is, have you all used any specific tools to help you analyze body-worn camera footage in investigations? And if so, have you received any stakeholder pushback, whether it be from officers or community members? Lieutenant, your team, anything on that?
Yeah, we don't have any software that, we don't. It's all within the naked eye. Unfortunately, it seems like some of those software programs that could assist us, we are not as far advanced as we should be with technology. I mean, before I pushed for money for something like that, I probably would, just so you're aware, just where we stand, probably would push for more analytic software to deal with cell phones in these investigations and stuff like that. So I'm not so sure, that's never really come up as something that we need. We more probably need a little bit better technology to deal with all the cell phone data that we get from these investigations, more than we would with body camera data.
Makes sense. Very much so. How about with Wichita? Anything, Tim, related to that? Any specific software or anything specific tools, I guess, is what the question was.
No, we have different areas that might use video editing software to break down videos. For example, our internal affairs, or we call them professional standards. We recently had an excessive force complaint. To go into as little detail as possible, an alleged kick to a rib cage that looked like it in the video, but when it was put into this software that the investigator was using, he was able to break it down frame by frame, which at 30 seconds or 30 frames per second still isn't great, but was able to see that the foot, the angle was off. It didn't in slower motion. It clearly was not a kick to the ribs. And that helped clear that officer of that investigation, being able to slow that video down. And then our open records team, who release videos to the media or to the public, they use video editing software to redact faces or blur faces out, mute audio when personal information is given. So we're not releasing that personal information to the public.
Yeah, great. Another question, are there any thoughts on who can view the body worn camera video? Can any officer view another officer's video? And are there compelling reasons, special interest groups, etc., to restrict access for viewing video? So it's a broad question, and I'll start with Rochester. So what's your policy, what's your procedures for who gets to view the video, Lieutenant?
So from the rank of investigator and up, which would include sergeant, lieutenant, captain, they can review any video that has a minimum security level on it, which I said before is probably at 98, 99% of our videos. For the officers, they can only view their own videos. I'm trying to think, I think we set it that way to try to preserve some of the integrity of the video. And because ultimately you can view it out of our system, but it doesn't prevent anybody from recording that video with a cell phone and releasing it without authorization. So to try to control some of that and the amount of numbers that we have looking at the video, officers can only view their own videos.
Thank you, sir. Tim, anything from Wichita?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've actually changed recently. We initially had it set just like Rochester. Officers can only view their own videos, and then detectives or investigators and up could see other videos. Now, if we had it broken down to persons crimes and property crime section in our investigations, property crimes could see everything on the lower level of being classified, and persons crimes could see the higher restricted videos. And the reason for that was that our persons crimes are who investigate along with, I guess, with KBI and outside agencies, but they'll investigate our officer involved shootings, and they would need access to those videos, along with our Professional Standards Bureau for administrative investigations. They have access to those videos. When we started using the Capture app for our photos last year, we opened that up to, as long as it's the lowest level of classification, anybody can see all of the videos and photos. We have so many specialty units on our department who do follow-up work, and when they're pulling up cases, because those photos are no longer in our records management system, the officers need to be able to review photos when they're following up on these cases. And when we had it locked down, they were having to send requests to detectives to gain access to these photos, and that was very time consuming. So with the way the system we use is set up, we do have a policy in place that says that you cannot release video to the public without approval of the chief of police, and you cannot use an external recording device like a cell phone to record the screen. Obviously, that's just a policy, and it could theoretically still be done. But with the system we use, it has a very detailed audit trail. And if there is a video that ends up out there, we would hope that we could go into that audit trail and narrow down who may have been in there during a certain time frame and straighten that out. But we just had to start trusting our officers with that, and then weigh the pros and the cons, and the thorough investigations, follow-up investigations that our officers were doing. We felt that it better benefited them to have access to those photos. I think if we had the option to allow them to review photos and not the videos, we would turn that on, but it's not an option. It's either they're able to see everybody's or they're not.
Okay. Well, thank you. We had a couple other questions come in that we will respond to, we'll provide to the panel, but I want to respect the time. It's late in the day. And I just really want to thank this panel, everyone on board. Excellent discussion, a lot to be learned, and appreciate sharing your experiences, your perspectives, and your expertise. And I hope the audience found that some information that was helpful. And we encourage you to look at how body-worn camera can be used beyond the traditional applications that you might have with your agencies, and share that information with us so we can share it with others as well. So with that, I just want to wrap up and say thank you, everybody. Jessica, Rachel, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Tom. If you just give us just a few moments, we're going to wrap up with a closing from Dr. Cauldron and John Markovic, the head of BJA, so or the head of this program. So just one moment as we get situated.